The first thing Dani noticed was the broken pipe under the sink, fixed. She knew it had been broken because she had watched her father wedge a dishcloth under it 3 weeks ago and declare the landlord was going to handle it. And the landlord had not handled it, and the dishcloth had grown into a dense gray brick of absorbed water she wrung out into the sink every morning before school. She had done it that morning. The dishcloth was still damp when she pushed open the apartment door after school and found the pipe whole, soldered shut at the joint, the crack sealed with something that looked like silver thread woven tightly into the copper, and the dishcloth folded neatly on the edge of the sink. She stood in the kitchen for a long time looking at it. Her father wasn't home yet. Her grandmother, Abuela Sita, was in the living room watching her program, and when Dani called through the doorway to ask if anyone had come to fix the plumbing, her grandmother said no, without looking away from the screen. Dani crouched and put her finger against the silver thread on the pipe. It was warm. It wasn't solder she recognized, finer than anything she had seen at the hardware store, almost like embroidery but rigid, and where the light caught it at the right angle it pulsed with something that wasn't quite a color. She went to the window and looked at the alley below. Nothing moved except a cat picking its way between the dumpsters. She told herself she had imagined the pulse. That night she dreamed of small things moving in the walls, not like rats scrabbled, but careful and deliberate, like machines that knew exactly where they were going and took care not to scratch the plaster. She did not have to wait long to understand. She had not imagined any of it. The next morning, the hallway light on the 3rd floor, which had been out since October, and which the building management company had not fixed despite 4 written requests, 2 from her father and 2 from Mrs. Abrenica in 3C, was on. Not just on. The fixture itself had changed. The original bulb had been a bare incandescent. What was there now had a small casing around it, hexagonal, no bigger than a matchbox, and it cast a warmer and steadier light than the fixture had managed even when new. When Dani reached up and touched the casing, she was tall for 14, could just reach it. It hummed faintly against her fingers and was warm in the same way the pipe joint had been warm. She went back to her apartment and knocked on the wall. Nothing answered. She felt foolish. She tried again, 3 light taps, and waited. From inside the wall, not in response, she told herself, just coincidentally, came a series of sounds. Tiny and precise, a click, a faint whirring, a second click, then silence. She pressed her ear to the plaster and heard nothing more. But when she pulled her ear away, there was a new joint in the baseboard heater pipe running along the bottom, or a joint that had been cracked, and where the crack had been there was more of the silver thread. She sat on the floor with her back against the wall and thought very carefully. She told Marcus first. Marcus was 16 and lived in 2B with his mother and his little sister, and he was the most practically minded person she knew, which was why she told him instead of her best friend Yolanda, who would have immediately involved at least 4 other people and possibly a social media post. Marcus came up the stairs, looked at the baseboard, touched the silver thread the way she had, and said nothing for a while. Then he said, "There's something in 2B2. The circuit breaker for the kitchen. It kept tripping all summer, and my mom has been cooking by candlelight. I came home yesterday and it wasn't tripping anymore." He paused. "And there's something on the panel, small." They went to 2B. His mother was at work. They crouched in front of the breaker box and Marcus pulled the cover open, and they both looked at the small hexagonal module affixed to the interior, flush against the wall, smaller than a thumb, doing something to the wiring that neither of them could identify, but that had clearly stopped the circuit from tripping. Every light in the apartment was on, and the refrigerator was running steadily for what Marcus said was the first time in months. "Something is fixing the building," Dani said. Marcus looked at her. "Yeah. Something small. Very small." She said carefully, "I think they came from somewhere that isn't here." He was quiet a moment. Then, "My little sister drew a picture this morning. She said she saw something in the hall at night. He went to the refrigerator, which was now actually cold, and pulled a piece of paper from under a magnet. His sister was 9 and a careful artist for her age. The drawing showed a small oval shape about the size of a hand. It had 4 legs like a spider's but curved, and 2 articulated front appendages ending in clusters of fine filaments. It had 2 points of light where a face might have been. Beside it, his sister had written in her best handwriting, FRINDLY. Dani stared at the drawing for a long time. She said it fixed her night light, Marcus said. She'd been asking me to fix it for a month. The building was called the Harrow Arms, and it had been scheduled for demolition since the city sold the block to a development company in the spring. The tenants had known since May. A notice on the board by the mailboxes, then letters, then a meeting with a company representative who had explained the relocation assistance package in careful detail, and had not answered any question about whether that assistance was enough to afford rent anywhere within a 40-minute commute. The deadline was the end of February. It was now the second week of January, and most tenants had found places smaller, further, more expensive, and some had not. Her family had not. Her father was working on it, which meant it existed in a category of things he mentioned at dinner, with a specific quality of contained worry that Dani recognized as the edge of a problem he did not know how to solve. She had not connected the building situation to the small machines until she knocked on Mrs. Abrenica's door. Mrs. Abrenica was 73 and had lived in 3C for 31 years, first to respond in writing to the demolition notice, last to stop looking for a lawyer who could do something about it. When Dani knocked, Mrs. Abrenica opened the door, said, "I've been waiting for someone to come ask," and stood aside. The apartment was warm and smelled like coffee and the specific dust of old books. On the kitchen table was a bowl of water with a small piece of bread in it and a thin coil of copper wire laid beside it like an offering. Mrs. Abrenica sat down and folded her hands. "First night," she said. "I heard them in the walls. I am old enough to know the difference between rats and something that isn't rats. I put out water and bread in the morning because it seemed polite." "Did they take it?" Dani asked. "The bread, no. The water, I'm not sure. It was lower." She paused. "One of them came out when the lights were off. I was awake, I don't sleep well anymore, and it came out from behind the radiator and sat on the edge of the table and looked at me. I looked back. It was the size of a large mouse but had no fur, only panels, very fine, and light came from it in 2 places. Soft light. We sat like that for perhaps 5 minutes, then it went back behind the radiator." Dani sat down. "And you weren't frightened?" Mrs. Abrenica considered this. "Of something that sits on a table and looks at you with soft eyes and goes away when it's ready? No, I know what fear feels like. This wasn't it." She looked at the bowl. "I think they're assessing us." "Assessing?" "They're learning what needs to be done. They've been fixing things. The boiler pressure gauge broken for 2 years. It's not broken anymore. The stairwell drain. The gap in the roof flashing above 4A that Mr. Osai has been complaining about since September." She paused. "I looked up what that kind of leak costs to fix. $4,000. Whatever they did up there, I don't think it cost $4,000. Dani thought about the drawing, the careful pencil, the word FRINDLY. She said, "Why do you think they're doing it?" Mrs. Abrenica was quiet for a moment. "I think they came here because something led them here, and they stayed because they found something worth staying near. I am 73 years old and I have had neighbors in this building for 31 years. People who brought food when my husband died. People whose children I watched grow up. People who checked on me during the hard times and who I checked on in return. I don't think that's common in the world. I think perhaps it's something that can be recognized from outside." Dani sat with that for a while. She found them herself on the 4th night. She had been leaving a small cup of water by the baseboard heater in her room each evening, feeling slightly absurd about it, and on the 4th night she woke at 2 in the morning to a faint warmth near her hand, which was hanging over the edge of the bed. She stayed very still and let her eyes adjust. One of them was on the floor beside her bed, standing perfectly still, its 2 points of soft amber light tilted upward toward her face. Its 4 curved legs were planted on the hardwood. Its front filaments were folded. It was about the size of her outstretched hand. She did not move. She did not speak. It regarded her for what she estimated was 90 seconds. Then it turned, walked to the baseboard, and disappeared behind it. As it went, one of the tiny filaments brushed the floor and left a mark she would find in the morning. A thin line of silver, no wider than a strand of hair, curving back on itself in a shape she could not identify but which felt intentional. She got up the next morning and photographed it before anyone else could see it. The decision came from the city on a Thursday in the last week of January. The demolition permit had been challenged, anonymously, on the grounds of a structural irregularity report filed by an engineering firm that, when Dani searched, appeared to be perfectly legitimate with offices in a city 2 hours north. The report cited 17 specific repair items throughout the Harrow Arms, all completed to code or beyond. It said beyond, specifically, with something approaching bewilderment in the dry language of the assessment, and argued that the building as it now stood did not meet the conditions of the demolition order, which had been partly predicated on the structure being beyond economical repair. Beyond economical repair, but it wasn't anymore. Her father read the notice at the kitchen table twice, put it down, picked it up again. He said very carefully the boiler, the roof, the wiring in the basement, the stairwell drain. He was counting. Dani watched him. "Someone fixed all of this," he said. He looked up at her. "Do you know anything about this?" She thought about what she knew. The warm pipe joint in silver thread, the hexagonal modules in the light fixtures, the amber eyes in the dark of her room, the drawing on the refrigerator, the copper wire on Mrs. Abrenica's table left as a small and precise evidence of contact. She said, "I think we had help." Her father looked at her for a long moment. "What kind of help?" "The kind that doesn't want to be thanked," she said, "or at least not in a way we'd know how to do." He looked at the table. He set the notice down flat and smoothed it with the edge of his hand. He said quietly, "Okay." They were gone by February. Not all at once. The signs disappeared gradually over the last 2 weeks of January. No new silver thread in the mornings, no sound in the walls, the warmth behind the radiators fading to the ordinary temperature of a well-maintained building. Marcus's sister checked every night and reported nothing, though she left her drawing taped to the wall beside her door, face outward, just in case. Mrs. Abrenica left the bowl of water on the table until the end. On the first day of February, Dani went to the roof. It was cold and clear, the grid of the city laid out in winter light. She stood for a while with her hands in her pockets and her breath clouding in front of her, looking at the sky, which told her nothing. But when she turned to go back down, she saw it. A faint trail of silver thread along the top of the roofline parapet, a line that ran from the corner where the flashing repair had been done and curved out over the edge in a gesture that seemed. She knew this was not rational, like something deliberately aimed upward. Not at the sky exactly, at a direction. She touched it, warm still, fading. She thought about what Mrs. Abrenica had said. That kindness was something that could be recognized from outside. That what they had here, in this building, in these 31 years of neighbors and food brought to the bereaved, and children watched and doors checked during the hard times, that was something worth staying near. She thought about small amber eyes in the dark, patient and unhurried, assessing not the building but the people in it, finding them sufficient, finding them of all the things in this cold grid of a city worth saving. She looked at the sky one more time. "Thank you," she said. The parapet was cold stone and empty air, and nothing answered. But she had not expected it to, and the silence felt, in its particular quality, like a reply.